South Carolina takes down the Kentucky Wildcats by a final score of 17-14 in a game that Shane Beamer and company had to have. It was one thing to beat Jacksonville State. Who cares, right? It was one thing to beat Vandy, worst team in the SEC, inferior opponent. But to take down a Kentucky team that admittedly, yours truly, I was very high on over the summer. To take down a Kentucky team that has had their way with you over the last decade or so, to make it back-to-back wins over Kentucky and Mark Stoops and Shane Beamer now carrying a winning record against the Wildcats. Massive. Absolutely massive, guys. We'll touch on that specific detail more in just a second. But, guys, my first takeaway, Cockvember, or if you want to call it Crowvember, I don't care what you want to call it. The month of November and South Carolina's ability to play their best football at the end of the season continues. You know, my good friend Chris Lee of Southeastern 14, he made a great point a few weeks ago on his platform that, you know, he didn't really understand where this Cocktober notion was coming from, right? Josh Pate, our good buddy from 24/7, he sort of ran with that Cocktober, and I respect it. Like, nobody hates good publicity, right? But if you look back at Shane Beamer's tenure, it's the month of November when his program turns it on. Now 8-3 in the month of November under Shane Beamer. And I think it goes, you know, even beyond just the play on the field, guys, because, you know, we said it over the summer, and there's a reason that, you know, I picked South Carolina to beat Kentucky over the summer in my preseason predictions, right? Because I felt, hey, this is a team under Shane Beamer, probably going to start slow. You looked at the schedule, but one thing you know, as sure as toe meeting leather every Saturday, you know that this team is going to improve week after week after week. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And Shane Beamer is going to have this football team playing their best football at season's end. And sure enough, that's what we saw on Saturday. Now, it was an ugly win, right? It was ugly. Let's call it for what it is. Slugfest, if you will. I did not see that coming. I told you guys to hammer the over. Silly me. Silly me. Still, at the end of the day, it's find a way. To steal one from Carolina baseball, it's win anyway. It's win anyway. It's just find a way to get the victory, whether it's 42-40 or it's 17-14. But the month of November, too, guys, doesn't it feel like South Carolina in this month during the Shane Beamer era? You know what else it means? It doesn't just mean the team improve play on the field, but the atmosphere. It's almost like Gamecock Nation comes alive. Like, there are other really passionate fan bases, guys, like across the SEC, across college football. You know, there are so many out there that tout the best fan base in the country claim. And I mean, again, there's a lot of fan bases that are really great. Like, Nebraska fans keep showing up. Like, you know, fan bases across the conference. Like, there are a lot of good ones, right? There's a lot of really, really good ones. But watching that game, and you look at the atmosphere and the way South Carolina's fan base, the way the fan base brings the energy, brings the passion, brings the excitement, right? It's like in the month of November, it feels like it's a different level. A lot of night games in that month for South Carolina during the Shane Beamer era. It's just on this different level. Like, this program is embodying the whole they remember November mantra that Shane Beamer loves to preach. Now, listen, I understand the pushback. Why can't they start quicker? Why can't they start faster? Certainly, that's going to be a talking point for next season going into 2024. But it does not take away from the fact, guys, that this football team, this football program under Shane Beamer, one thing you can count on, right? Because you do it 1 year, hey, it's a fun story. You do it 2 years, okay, maybe it's just luck. You do it 3 years in a row, playing your best football or playing football that is good enough to go on a 3-game winning streak. I'll just say that. There's something to that. There's something to that. You got to give a lot of credit to Shane Beamer, that coaching staff, the culture that Shane Beamer has built. Because when this team was 2-6, hell, when this team was 3-6 and almost lost to Jacksonville State, I mean, who knew? You know what I mean? Like, who knew? Who knew? To keep this thing together, to rally the troops, to circle the wagons. And then the Kentucky game when things really didn't go your way. Kentucky's up 14-10 in that game. And I know many of you, like me, had a sick feeling in your stomach like, man, here we go again. This is 2017 Kentucky all over again. You jump out to a big lead and you squander it. And that was not the case, right? Willie B came alive, guys. That's on my notes as well. Another big takeaway. I mean, just Willie B at night just hits different, man. We've had this conversation so many times. And I was asked by Mark Ryan last week and others, how many points is it worth, right, for South Carolina to play a night game? Why doesn't Vegas give it anything? And, we've seen South Carolina fall in night games. We have. But I tell you, man, under Shane Beamer, it feels like it's a different level. I mean, you cannot watch Carolina football play and tell me they're the same team during the day at Willie B as they are at night. That atmosphere is completely different. It goes to another level. And, I think that's one of those things. And it's one of the reasons why, guys, I went with South Carolina for my pick. At home, at night, the better quarterback. But, it feels like being under the lights at Willie B, it's that thing that can push Carolina over the edge. Now, on the field, hey, let's give a lot of credit, man. Like I mentioned, the slugfest we all expected, right? No, I mean, I had 35-34. I thought this was an offensive shootout. I thought Ray Davis was going to go up and down the field, Devin Leary to Barryon Brown and Dane Key and his array of weapons. I thought South Carolina had no chance defensively. Shout out to that coaching staff for going for switching up to the 3-man front defensively. I mean, that spelled immediate results in that football game. You hold Devin Leary to 17-34, 171 yards, a touchdown, and a pick, and a huge pick by Nick Imawari. I mean, guys, think about that play. Kentucky is in chip shot field goal range. And Nick Imawari makes a snag that rivals any you've seen in college football in regards to what a defensive back can do, makes a big play, stifles that drive. That was the difference in the ballgame. Ray Davis, 12 for 61, a touchdown. I mean, they ran the football decently. Ramon Jefferson, 6 for 50. You can question some of Kentucky's decision-making in regards to play calling, what have you. I know they're feeling some type of way today, but South Carolina, man, defensively just made the big plays when they had to. I mean, only gave up 293 yards total offense, 171 passing, 122 rushing. Again, the Gamecocks with those 3 massive turnovers, right? It reminded me, guys, this game reminded me a lot of a lower scoring Mississippi State game. It was a lower scoring Mississippi State game to where that game was hanging on by a thread, right? And it was your defense, your defensive line that stepped up and made some big plays. Jordan Strawn was an animal, played with his hair on fire. Tonka Hemingway was very good. TJ Sanders made plays in the middle. And that's why I said, guys, it just feels like when the Gamecocks are at home at night, dudes tend to step up. I mean, guys just tend to step up. And I'll admit, if you told me South Carolina scored 17 points in that ball game, if you'd have told me that last week, hey, Carolina's going to score 17 points, do they win or lose? I would have told you they lost 100 times out of 100. I did not believe that defense was capable of putting together that kind of performance. I don't care where Kentucky's ranked, guys. I know many will say Kentucky was near the 100th ranked nationally in total offense. I get that. But, guys, the Gamecocks haven't been able to stop anyone. And so to put that type of performance together, we talked about Clayton White's defenses a lot. You got to generate turnovers. That's when they're at their best. The turnovers continue to come in bunches. That's got to continue, right? You did everything right to win this football game in regards to you were at home at night with Spencer Rattler. Your quarterback played well, and you won the turnover battle 3-0. You did everything right from that standpoint. And that's what it took to beat that Kentucky team. And again, can't say enough good things about that defense. I mean, that performance, I didn't see that. I didn't see the defense having that type of performance this year. And by far, their best performance of the season. Now, switching gears, guys, offensively. Isn't it funny? We talked about last week, hey, for South Carolina to win, it's very simple. Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette. They got to be special. They got to be ball out. All of your offense comes from Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette. On a night in which, guys, the Gamecocks generate just 257 yards of offense. 257. And, guys, of those 50 rushing yards, Spencer Rattler had 24 of them. 24 of them. Right? Rattler goes 19 of 27, 207, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Xavier Legette, 6 for 94, 2 touchdowns to his credit. It is astonishing to me that teams continue to play single coverage on Xavier Legette. That just, like, taking nothing away from South Carolina. Like, if you're an opposing D coordinator, you look at South Carolina and you say, we got to stop one guy. Like, if we put the clamps down on 17, we feel pretty good about our chances. And teams just continue to try to play him one-on-one, and they continue to get burnt. And whatever defenses have done all year, it hadn't worked because he's been an animal. He's been a dude all season long. It's the Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette show. I mean, really, truly. And so it's crazy that South Carolina's even 5-6 with that fact offensively. In a game in which you were not good on offense, right? Our good friend Chris Doring pointed out 6 of your last 9 possessions, guys, were 3 and out. And by the way, going back to the defense, South Carolina had opportunities, guys, late in that football game to put that game away with their offense, could not do it. I mean, it was excruciating. It was excruciating watching the offense get the football. Okay, 2 first downs, ends the game. Negative play, negative play, negative play. All 3 are rushes. Like, the offensive line, they got whipped. Like, let's call it for what it is. They got whipped. We're going to be fair here. Give attention to the good, the bad, the ugly. The good is you won the ball game. The good is the turnovers you got on defense. The bad is, we'll say, lack of rushing game. The ugly, though, let's just say the offense as a whole, because it was ugly. I mean, it was ugly. South Carolina starts out hot. You think they're going to win that game by 30 points. Offense goes completely silent. And people, including yours truly, were starting to say, Dowell Loggins, like, what is going on? I don't leave this game like I felt after Jacksonville State, guys, where, it was an ugly win, but a win is a win, but it felt empty. Well, I mean, this was over an SEC opponent. This was over an SEC opponent that over the last decade has had somewhat their way with you, and now to get back-to-back wins, like a win's a win's a win in the SEC. You take them where you can get them. But it was ugly offensively. I mean, this was a game that set offensive football back decades, truly. And so, as surprised as I was to see what South Carolina did defensively, I think I was equally surprised to see how bad the Gamecocks were offensively. Like, that was stunning to me. The best thing the Gamecocks did offensively, guys, was not turn the football over. And I've been talking about this all year. The best thing Spencer Rattler has done, guys, it's not necessarily, as the dogs go crazy, that his ceiling is it's much higher. We all knew that ceiling was there. It's that the floor has been raised to a point where he's not throwing dumb interceptions. He's not making bad decisions. He's not turning the football over. And in a game like that, I mean, it literally made all the difference. You add in a turnover or two for South Carolina, They don't win that football game, in my opinion. So, offensively, you lean on Spencer Rattler, you lean on Xavier Legette. Those two guys were great yet again, but I mean, that's about all you had going. And that leads me into, what went wrong with the offense, guys? The offensive line wasn't very good. Spencer Rattler at times was running for his life. Give Kentucky's defense credit for sure. Give Kentucky's defense credit for sure. I mean, they had 2 sacks. I'll tell you this. The thing that has been the biggest or one of the biggest game changers for Spencer Rattler, in my opinion, go back and watch that Kentucky game. It's his legs. 10 carries for Rattler. He registered 10 carries in that football game. 10 carries for 24 yards. But the ability to evade pressure and make something out of nothing, obviously extending plays, throwing on the run, but like couple third down conversions in there, a couple plays where, again, if it's blown up, puts you way behind the sticks, the drive's probably killed. He's able to make 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 yards out of it. Like, what Rattler has done with his legs, with his running ability, that to me has been one of the biggest game changers and one of the biggest things that has helped South Carolina push them forward as an offense and should elevate his draft stock as well. Because you get a guy like that who knows where he's at in the pocket, the awareness levels at an all-time high. That has been so impressive to me. So impressive. But it was a concerning night offensively, guys. I write it off as this. I'm not overly concerned for the long term because South Carolina has been so good all year on the offensive side. Just like, honestly, guys, I look at the defensive performance and I say, I don't think you can expect the Gamecocks to go out there against Clemson like the 85 Bears. Like, I don't know that, like, that's really who they are. But I think that game, I think it was just the vibe of the game. I just think that was, from early on, that was a defensive slugfest. That was 2 teams that, I don't know, man, maybe it's a big game. They're feeling each other out, what have you. But, definitely a lot to correct offensively. A lot to correct. Give Kentucky credit. That Deion Walker kid, I mean, he just ate up South Carolina. 9 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. But you made the big plays and you had to, and you did just enough. Now, guys, I led off this segment with this. The significance of back-to-back wins over Kentucky. And I know some people were mocking it on social media. How could you say that back-to-back wins over Kentucky is a massive thing for Carolina? Well, that's because I'm not looking at Kentucky like some others are. A lot of Gamecock Nation still looks at Kentucky like Vandy for some reason. Like, Mark Stoops has turned Kentucky into a good program. Mark Stoops has turned Kentucky into a program that South Carolina has to deal with, right? Like, this isn't just check it off like Vandy. It's an easy W. We're going to win 14 in a row. It's more similar to going up against Mizzou. And it's big for South Carolina because, yes, you won last year, but you hadn't won back-to-back games against Kentucky, guys, since 2012 to 2013. And people talk all the time, man, if you want to elevate the program, you got to beat Georgia, you got to beat Tennessee, you got to beat Florida. And certainly beating those teams is important. But you cannot elevate the South Carolina program if you cannot beat Kentucky on a consistent basis. At least, let's just say over the course of a decade, beat them more than they beat you, right? Same thing goes to Missouri. Obviously, that did not work out this year, hasn't worked out of late. But that's another one. You need to beat the Kentuckys and the Missouris of the world before you ever start thinking about competing for an SEC championship. So to protect the home field, to get that W, to turn the tide in that series, some folks may not want to hear it because they don't want to give Kentucky the credit or they don't want to come to face the facts that Kentucky had South Carolina's way for a while. But now all of a sudden, Shane Beamer's won 2 in a row against Mark Stoops. All of a sudden, Shane Beamer is 2-1 against Kentucky. And guys, similar to when I talk about South Carolina and Tennessee and how that series, it takes the Gamecocks 3x or 4x in regards to wins to get ahead of Tennessee as a program in the minds of people versus Tennessee beat South Carolina 1 year. They get the benefit of the doubt. Well, it's that way in the Kentucky-South Carolina series as well. And Kentucky fans aren't going to want to hear that. But because of Kentucky's history, they've got to largely dominate the series against South Carolina for people to go, you know what? Maybe Kentucky is a better program. But all South Carolina has to do You win back-to-back against Kentucky, there's nobody out there that's going to sit there and say, well, Kentucky's a better program than South Carolina. Nobody's going to say that. So it's significant. Perception is reality. SEC hierarchy is a real thing. And Kentucky is now another team and another program that Shane Beamer and South Carolina have leapfrogged. Now, all that being said, I couldn't go through this without talking about rivalry week and the way that this now, why is this such a big win? Why is this such a big deal? Beating Kentucky's a big deal. Getting your 5th win's a big deal. Winning at home, winning at Williams-Brice Stadium, winning 3 in a row is a big deal. But beating Kentucky's a big deal because it sets up an all-or-nothing game practically with the Clemson Tigers. That's why it's such a big deal. Because now it sets up, okay, you beat Clemson, you get to 6, you get to a bowl game. This has got the feelings of like the early 2000s when South Carolina and Clemson would square off. And it's not quite there because Clemson already there at bowl eligibility, right? I think they're 7-4 right now. They're already there. They're not worried about going to a bowl game, but it's like the only significance of the Palmetto Bowl is bragging rights. That and bowl eligibility. That's all that's on the line this year. That's it, right? So beating Kentucky was a big deal because it's beating Kentucky. But it's also a big deal because now the rivalry comes into focus. And South Carolina's bowl hopes, which have been hanging on by a thread for weeks, this is all you could have hoped for as a Gamecock fan. 5-6, winners of 3 in a row, and the stage is now set. South Carolina, Clemson. Bragging rights on the line, bowl eligibility on the line. Will Cockvember, Crowvember, whatever you want to call it, does it continue this Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium?